Maybe you have a hard time with priorities. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to get done, right? So sometimes you could substitute one important thing for another important thing. For example, you could say, I really have to get my apartment clean, and I really have to write this paper. But I need to get the apartment done first. Well, really, you could leave the apartment and go to a park or a library to write your paper. The paper will probably have more consequences than waiting till the next day to clean your apartment. Here's my favorite, and probably most of yours too. You let a short break become a long one. You know, maybe you sat down with full intention of writing that paper, but then somebody called and said, hey, you want to go for a walk? And you think, oh, you know, I could use a break. Or maybe you did start it. Maybe you're in the middle of it. You know, just 10, 20 minutes, even an hour. That's not that bad. It's good to take breaks. But then you take the walk and you have some other idea. You know, we could go to this store, or we could go see somebody, or make a phone call. You know, that 20 minutes to an hour becomes 3 hours to 6 hours or 8 hours. And then when you get home, you're not going to start writing the paper again. So instead of taking a short break, you took an enormously long break. Of course, you don't do that, right? That's just me. A lot of students become obsessed, so focused on one part of the assignment or task at the expense of the rest. They just can't move on and get any of the rest of them because one part just isn't quite right. Well, you know, that's why we're supposed to not procrastinate, so that we have time to edit and proofread and make those little parts better, not just put off the rest of it. It kind of defeats the purpose for most of it to be crappy so that one part can be perfect. So maybe it's the introduction, maybe it's the thesis statement, maybe it's one sentence or phrase in the middle of the paper, but sometimes you get hung up on that one thing. You really have to move on and get all of it done, and then go back and fix all of the little quirky areas. Alright, at this point, you've probably admitted that you do procrastinate, or at least most of you, not all of you, but you procrastinate. You probably know how and why you procrastinate, but the question is, what do you do about it? Because it's such a habit that is so hard to break that admitting that you have this problem is really easy, but changing that habit, that's a whole nother story. Number 1, create a productive environment. Now you need to understand this or you'll take it too far and use this as a reason to procrastinate. For example, recognize and understand yourself. What excuses do you use? If your excuse is that everything is too loud and you just can't focus and get it done, then go somewhere quiet. If you need noise, go somewhere where you have the right kind of noise. You could go to a park or a library or somewhere else. Maybe your house or apartment is great. Maybe it's not. Don't use this to say, well, I need to get my house spotless and wonderfully clean before I start the paper. Instead, remove yourself from that place and clean it after you're done with the paper. It might be better to schedule time to go to a library or go to a park or go somewhere that you're comfortable to write the paper instead of being somewhere that you know you're going to be distracted. Along those lines a little bit, so many of us have these little myths, these things that we say that we hang on to and we use as excuses and we really believe are true, but they're not. And we need to recognize those things. Myth number 1, I can't possibly write this paper until I've cleaned my apartment. I've already touched on this twice. But you can go somewhere else and clean your apartment when it's done. Go somewhere that you're not distracted by needing to clean your apartment. But if your apartment isn't clean and it's time that you need to sit down and write the paper, sit down and write the paper. This is a favorite of so many. I do my best work under pressure. You know, that's not completely false. I'm not going to say that pressure doesn't motivate people to do better, but you are able to create pressure for yourself. For example, you could set an earlier due date and be accountable to someone because maybe you make an appointment at the Learning Center to have someone go over your paper and you have to have it done before you go there. Fine. Then you have a new due date, you have a new appointment for pressure to be applied, and yet you're not waiting until the night before the assignment is due. College freshmen especially tend to say things like this, but it's so absurd. In order to do my best work, I must have 6 uninterrupted hours. That is ridiculous. For example, when you say this, you're actually saying something like, during these 6 hours I prophesy that I will be able to be inspired and have my very best ideas. And then you sit down to write that paper, and you just expect the heavens to open, and you're just going to pour out the best words you've ever come up with. And you know what? Inspiration cannot usually be scheduled like that. Usually if you make those 6 uninterrupted hours, you will write a little bit of your paper as well as to-do lists and shopping lists and come up with a million other things that you would rather do and be completely unfocused, and you might actually force yourself to write the paper, but it is not going to be your best work. You actually do your best work when you break it up into segments, like 1 hour, even 30 minutes. Maybe you need 6 hours, maybe you need more, maybe you need less, but you don't really have to have them all right next to each other. Now, you may have to read over the work that you've already done so that you can get back into it, but 6 uninterrupted hours? I'm sorry, you don't need 6 uninterrupted hours. You need a little bit of time, 30 minutes, an hour, on 6 different days. That would be wonderful. And back to the evil doctrines of the perfectionist. What I write has to be perfect? No, it doesn't. In fact, there's no such thing as a perfect paper. In fact, some teachers make it their strong standing that they will never give a 100 to any paper, period, because there is no such thing as a perfect paper. You might get a 99, but you will never get a 100. Now, the way that I grade is as long as you fulfill what I require. You can get 100, but that, just because you get 100 does not mean that your paper was perfect. Your paper is not perfect. You can always improve something. Maybe you can use a better word here. Maybe you could have used a better punctuation mark there. Even if it's not incorrect, it could still be better, I guarantee. Maybe you could have had a better idea or thought through something a little bit better. It's never going to be perfect. So get over it and just let yourself go through the learning process instead and do your best and see what you can improve on each time. So much of this lecture has to do with just being realistic, because ultimately perfectionism is all about being unrealistic. Now, just as I talked about not needing 6 uninterrupted hours, in general, that means you need to break it down. You need to say, I'm going to have my rough draft due by this day, I'm going to have a second draft due by this day, and a third draft due by this day, or I'm going to have the introduction done here, or I'm going to have so many words written by this time. You are going to break it down differently than someone else, or than I would, or that 20 other people would. They're all going to break it down differently based on how they think and how they work best. But you need to figure out how you work best. That can be a very big challenge. But with each paper, you need to try harder to figure out what process you go through so that you can break it down and set the best goals for yourself. 4, get a new attitude. This is so important, especially if you're someone that says, well, it works, so it doesn't matter. Or maybe you're just always thinking about what you have to do and what's more important and how you're so busy. You've got to set priorities, and you've got to care. You've got to get an attitude that allows yourself to work on this. An attitude that says, I want to learn, I want to do my best, I want to demonstrate what I've learned and have a learning experience to grow. You have to want that. That's part of an attitude. And if you just can't master that, you're never going to overcome this habit of procrastinating. Number 5 is ask for help. Oh, everybody hates that, right? You want to be able to be independent and do everything yourself and be wonderful and not need help from anybody. But, sometimes you just need help. And really, if you didn't need help with things, why would you be in college again? Why do you need a teacher? Why do you need people around you helping you? You actually do need help. So, this is one of those times that maybe you need some help. There was one time that I had a student who had such a bad problem with procrastinating, and he kept turning things in late, and he just was not going to get these papers done. And it was getting close to the end of the semester, and I had given him a second chance, and he just wasn't going to get it done because he could not get over procrastinating. So I wrote a note home. Now, he was an older person, not a kid, I know, but he was married, and I wrote a note to his wife. And I told his wife that his grade greatly depended on him getting these 2 papers done. Please nag him. And she did. And, you know, we don't like being nagged, but ultimately, sometimes we need it. Ask somebody to remind you and stay on top of you and tell you to get things done and deal with it. Maybe that's the kind of help you need. Maybe it's the reminders. Maybe you need to set alarms on your phone. Maybe you need a person. Maybe you need a tutor just so that you have that earlier due date. Whatever it is that you need help with, ask for it. Number 6, get unblocked. Maybe your problem is you have some type of mental block, maybe about writing in general, or maybe about the assignment itself. Whatever it takes, get unblocked. That might mean doing some free writing, or talking to somebody about the assignment, or asking some questions, or getting away from distractions, or whatever you need to do. Get unblocked. Now, we're going to have another lecture pretty soon about writer's block or writing anxiety, and that might help you a little bit with this. But ultimately, you need to figure out what the problem is and do something about it. Number 7, make yourself accountable, is a lot like number 5, which was ask for help. Making yourself accountable is having somebody to report to that you'll actually feel accountable to. Feel bad if you haven't done what you said you would do. That could be a teacher, it could be a tutor, it could be a parent, it could be a friend. Whoever can do this job in some way, you need to make yourself accountable. That might mean that you're going to meet at the library on a certain day with somebody and let them read over your work. Whatever it is, somehow find a way to not only set the goals, but make yourself accountable to someone for getting those goals done. Number 8, it might help to leave your work out. For example, instead of packing it all up and getting it out of the way, out of sight, out of mind, leave it on the table so that you're constantly thinking about needing to get back to it and work on it some more. Now, if you're like me and you have kids, there's a risk of the kids tearing it up, so leave it out where you can see it, but put it somewhere a little higher than their reach can go. This is something that some of you who are really neat freaks might really have a problem with, but that's a good thing, because if you can't stand it being out, you're more likely to get it done so that you can put it up. So it might help you to leave it out till it's done. Now, if you're someone who is comfortable with a lot of filth and slob, then maybe this won't work for you. But decide whether or not it would, and if it would help, do it. Again, be realistic. How long does it take you to write? Try to overestimate, not underestimate. Think about the different parts. I need this much time to free write. I need this much time to write each page. I need this much time for proofreading and editing, and try to go over so that you have some time left over instead of running out of time. How about, while in college, make a conscious decision about which skills you want to improve now and which ones you want to procrastinate and improve on later. For example, the skill of procrastination would be a great one to procrastinate, save for later. If you want to put off the development of a particular skill, choose the skill of procrastination for later. This semester, work on improving the skill of writing instead. This presentation is based on the handout for procrastination from the University of North Carolina, but it does not cover everything in there, so if it would help, if you know that this is a problem that you have, it might be very useful to read over the actual handout. The link is posted, is here, but the